Making a video. Draft physics. Really not on the subject though, unfortunately, because of commenters and distractions. I suppose it's my own fault to just say something and they, you know, have to respond. You know, can't blame them for that, I suppose. But yeah, these aren't really conversations I need to have. The first one on the speed of sound and how sound is produced, or how waves in general are produced, which is sort of an important physics kind of subject, but not in the context of these people and their, whatever, I don't think very good arguments. So anyway, the first, so the James McGinn guy, so I have finally blocked him, he's just obnoxious. So anyway, his last comment was, LOL, you don't want to argue with denialists because you are ignorant. It's just so funny when somebody does something stupid like that, you know. Because you are ignorant, you know, you just, you kind of make the joke for your, you know, you punchline yourself, hoist on your own petard and such. You don't have a real argument. You just believe. No, I made a real argument. I mean, my real argument is that I could do like 2 plus 2 math. And I know what the oil is made out of, you know, the hydrocarbon kind of idea. And why it has energy in it is because of all this heat and energy that went into its construction. And it was sunk, literally, okay, into the ground. And that's a change in the atmosphere. The atmosphere was converted into a solid and stuck in the ground. And I can figure that much out, and I can figure out that we are releasing that. And, you know, in the process of doing that, we may release the methane, you know, that's stored in the frozen tundra and whatnot. And once that's free, you know, then you're going to have a little hot spell. You're going to have a little hot spell. It might stay hot. And it was hot previously. That's, like I said, kind of obvious. Dinosaurs just really wouldn't work if you had 50-degree nights, you know. No way to heat up one of those big, huge things. Just wouldn't work. But anyway, fuck you. Yeah, good enough. Like I said, I made an argument. You didn't counter-argue my argument. So, fuck you. It's just stupid. Yeah. You don't have anything. You know, your famous line. You don't have anything. Alright, then he says, just like the detractors of your theory, you won't present a concise dispute of my assertion that greenhouse effect is rubbish. You've based your assertion on no evidence. I mean, and the evidence for the concept of greenhouse is really solid. And the concept that it's created by hydrocarbons is really solid. So, you know, unless you have some spectacular evidence, there's no real conversation. You have to present some sort of rational theory how you think greenhouse effects don't take place, that our atmosphere isn't subject to creating those effects. And so what's your argument? You didn't present one. Yeah. I mean, I can't dispute a non-argument. Your ignorance, you can keep saying I'm ignorant, you're the one presenting no evidence, no even a rational theory of how the atmosphere does not have strata and that it doesn't create greenhouse effects. Where's your evidence that that doesn't take place? Your ignorance of this subject gives you false confidence that you understand what you don't. Well, that's another one of your stupid cockeye theories that you just made up now. That whole sentence is just made up psychobabble bullshit. So again, where's your argument? Oh, that's right, you don't have one. And you're probably thumbing up your own comments to boot, right? With your sock accounts, no doubt. Anyway, so this is the first comment he made. So Gary, climate change is 100% fake science. So you can't even be rational and say, oh look, they got a lot of misconceptions in their theories and blah blah blah. 100%. So every single thing they're basing the theory on, you say, is incorrect. Every single statement about every molecular reaction is fake science. I mean, it's a stupid thing to say. I mean, you're just showing your ignorance again, and that you can't make a rational argument within, the confines of reasonable. You can't make a reasonable argument. Instead, you have to make an outlandish argument. You are a victim of propaganda. Again, useless rubbish. You think you understand, but actually you don't. More useless nonsense. You're going to say the same thing again, another way. You have a vague belief based on things you saw on TV. Well, I will admit I've learned a lot on TV. I mean, especially in the early days of cable, you could watch open heart surgery and just about anything. So yeah, you could learn lots of stuff. The Learning Channel, the Discover Channel, those were actually informative channels in the beginning. And I did learn. CO2 does not have thermal characteristics cause an atmosphere to heat up. So that's not even another brilliantly bad sentence. CO2 does not have thermal characteristics cause an atmosphere to heat up. It's not about having thermal characteristics. I mean, that's not even an accurate way to describe it. There's probably some other, if you were an actual scientist or something, you'd know the jargon. But there's probably some other word for reflective indexes and, what's something absorption, that kind of thing. So you can't even get that part right. So then he says, to his own comment, he adds, your understanding of climate change is ignorant and arrogant. So more just crap. It's retarded to believe CO2 causes warming, really. So he thinks it's retarded to think that a gas that has been demonstrated in laboratory experiments to create a greenhouse effect is causing the greenhouse effect. Alright, so anyway, so I responded, so you don't believe CO2 is a greenhouse gas, ? That it reflects infrared radiation? Do you believe there are any greenhouse gases? And so instead of answering, he doesn't answer my questions, of course. So he says, let's see, here's his replies. Jim, LOL, like asking me if I believe in hay fever. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe you believe it's cancer or something. I don't know what you think. I mean, it's an open question now how reasonable or rational you are. The phrase greenhouse gas is common parlance that has been gravitated to appear. That's what it says. Scientifically concise. No, it's just a general term for the idea that more energy goes in than can get out, because when the energy is converted, the conversion type doesn't escape. It's a trap, an energy trap. There's no semantics problem with the idea of greenhouse gas, but it is not. Specifically, the phrase greenhouse gas is meaningless except in the context of enclosure, i.e. a greenhouse. No, that's just bullshit. I mean, it's comparable to a greenhouse because greenhouses function essentially the same way. It allows the ultraviolet radiation to go through. That radiation hits stuff inside the greenhouse and creates infrared radiation that reflects. And so it contains the energy. The energy doesn't reflect out again. So, and the idea is that atmospheric gases create the same effect. And there's nothing wrong with that science. Anyway. So he doesn't think there's an enclosure, I think. The air in the greenhouse, or the car gets hotter because it is trapped. Well, yes, exactly, idiot. Can you explain how CO2 creates an enclosure? I can explain how the atmosphere is an enclosure, how it's under pressure because of a thing called gravity, a subject I've talked about numerous times. and that the strata of the atmosphere is based on the buoyancy of different substances, but they're all under pressure. They're all being pushed into the earth and contained on the earth. Now there's some talk like helium escapes, but most gases do not. They're gravitationally held here. Alright, let's see. Trapped. Can you explain how CO2 creates an enclosure? So I'm just saying, you're saying the atmosphere isn't under pressure. It isn't essentially the same thing as a veneer or a finish or a polish or whatever you want to, it isn't essentially the same thing as a layer, okay, between us and empty space. Just like a greenhouse wall. Just like a glass plate. It doesn't function essentially just like that. Okay, of course you cannot. Well, I just think I did. I think you're an idiot. Because the supposition is absurd. No, it's perfectly rational. The atmosphere is a layer, and we're underneath it. I myself am politically liberal. Oh, I doubt that. You seem like you're a racist. I mean, I think that's what your whole little evolution theory is about. Whitey be better kind of bullshit. But anyway, but that doesn't mean I'm brain dead. I think you're brain, festered, brain blighted. And you have to be brain dead to believe a sliver of CO2, literally an increase of 0.0028%. Well, again, so they just play games with statistics, because they say, oh, it's only 1 part per million, or, 0.04 parts per million. Yeah, but that amount of dioxin will kill you. So again, just, because the way it's measured is measured in, terms of molecules per, a million of its volume, you think it doesn't mean it's a real thing in the real atmosphere. Oh, you're really dumb. What do you think? What do you think has a high parts per million in the atmosphere? Oh, that's right, empty space. Yes, there's more empty space in the atmosphere than there is molecules. Yeah, parts per million wise. Of course you cannot, because the super. Okay, let's see. Brain dead. Is going to cause the planet to warm. Yes, well, like I said, any increase in the effect of allowing energy in and not allowing it out, anything that increases that function, yes, that's right, it will make it warmer. I mean, you have to be freaking retarded to believe such. Well, again, you really don't have to be retarded. It's an insane exaggeration. The science is basically, 8th grade kind of earth science. Sorry. I mean, until you come up with your extraordinary evidence to debunk the volume of evidence regarding CO2's function in the atmosphere, you're the one that has to be called freaking retarded. It's just disgusting. Yes, it is disgusting. How gullible you are on the issue. So again, more talk, no evidence, no arguments, just more raggy shit. You're ugly. You look short. You look stupid. There, how's that? You look like you have a small penis and a smelly anus. There, do I win the argument now? You silly fuck. And it is especially disgusting when it comes from somebody who is so competent in theoretical physics. It's as if you just turn your mind off on issues that involve your political disposition. Well, I don't know how I have a political disposition. I'm for global warming, by the way. I see it as something to take advantage of. But you have to do it incrementally. And we should already have policies to get people to move away from the shoreline. That is, we shouldn't be insuring any housing there and all the rest of it. We should never rebuild in New Orleans, as I've stated. But yes, theoretically, I think the planet's probably better off greener. And it will be greener, hotter and wetter. And that's probably going to make it more productive overall. Um, and even so, like I said, but don't get me wrong, I'm not for global warming in the sense of no preparation and let's tragically and horribly displace half the human population that lives, less than 10 feet above sea level. Because yes, they're going to be fucked. All right, Gary. So then does this again. I don't know what this is. Okay, that it reflects infrared radiation. So his response to that is simple-minded nonsense. Whatever. CO2 absorbs and re-emits IR in a totally non-dramatic fashion. Well, it says you. So where's your evidence that it does it in a way that it doesn't pass ultraviolet light and reflect infrared? Where's your evidence it doesn't do that? N2 and O2, which collectively comprise 98% of the non-liquid gases in the atmosphere. So he has the theory that the gases in the atmosphere really aren't gases, they're in the liquid state. Whatever. Reflect IR. So there is something deeply erroneous about your comprehension of this subject. Well, again, my comprehension is the simple idea that energy goes through the atmosphere in one form. It's converted on the surface of the Earth, and that converted form is reflected. Now that's not very complicated. And why don't you explain how that's not happening on planet Earth? And it's not happening in a accelerating manner. H2O in the atmosphere, which is always liquid, not gas. Which again, make that argument to someone else. Okay, so again, you're saying that you are asserting that a liquid form of water somehow floats on nitrogen. I don't think that makes much sense, idiot. Is what absorbs and gradually re-emits IR. Well, it certainly plays a part like everything else in the atmosphere. The point isn't whether there are other things that cause the greenhouse effect. The point is whether CO2 is a contributor. And you haven't presented any evidence that CO2 isn't. Do you believe there are any greenhouse gases, I asked. Okay, his last response. In a greenhouse, yes. So he thinks greenhouses work because of the gas inside of the greenhouse. Now, they do pump CO2 into greenhouses, but they do that just because the plants like it. Because the plants sort of feed on CO2. But it's both it's a metabolizer. But what they're really doing, like these people make these arguments like, well, a pine tree creates more CO2 than a car, or some kind of bullshit like that. But the truth is, yeah, they do, but they also store more than they emit. So in that process, they're converting the CO2 into wood, into a solid that's out of the atmosphere. And so they're making a substance, a solid, out of the gas in the process. But anyway, yes. So he said in a greenhouse. So he thinks there's greenhouse gases in a greenhouse. Yes. The atmosphere, question mark. So he can't even, again, he can't say in the atmosphere. He says it. It isn't even a realistic, I mean, the N and the T aren't even close to each other on the keyboard. I mean, that can't even be a typo. So that's got to be some other form of retardation. It's just dumbass propaganda. So it's dumbass propaganda to think that Venus is a real story. Where Venus gets super hot because of the atmosphere in Venus. That appeals to liberal ideologies. Well, again, I don't know what it has to do with being liberal or conservative. It just has to do with whether you are a complete lunatic. I made the simple argument I made before, I think, is a good argument. If you don't understand what a carbon sink is, you don't understand why coal is black and why oil is black. Yes, the natural gas isn't, but it's all hydrocarbon nonetheless. It's carbon in the methane. So, but you really don't understand that when that carbon is in those forms, methane, natural gas, coal, oil, that it's not in the atmosphere. And those are really only the two choices. It has to be, carbon has to be sunk or it's free in the atmosphere. But those are like the two choices. You don't get that? It's sort of like the ice ocean thing. If the water isn't frozen, then it's a liquid. You just don't have that many choices. And there isn't any natural mechanism that takes carbon and makes it a solid besides biological growth doing it. I mean, there's no mechanical mechanism of the earth that sinks carbon naturally. The way that carbon got sunk is because living things sunk it. So anyway, alright, so I'll just delete this whole thread. It's a fucking idiot. Alright, and then he commented to this other idiot. So this other idiot says, I don't believe fuel is from fossils. It's only called fossil fuel because it's really old. Okay? It's not called fossil fuel because it's made out of fossils. In any realistic way. It's just related to the same kind of process. It's a really long process that creates fuel out of vegetation mostly. 99.99% of the oil is made out of vegetation that fell down in a swamp because we lived in the world was hot and wet. And so all this stuff fell into the bog, and the bog ate it. Okay, and it created methane and did lots of other things, but over tons of years of that stuff, and then there's earthquakes and shit, and it gets covered, and once it's sealed up, that's it. It's a big giant battery full of energy, but full of carbon. So so a statement by you, okay, hat sack or sock, whatever. What's the point of your commentary? I mean, I don't know why people even post these kind of comments. Like, I never even occurred to me to go on somebody's video and say something like, I think you are wrong. I think, Tinkerbell would have beat Godzilla in a fair fight. Why would somebody give a shit what my opinion is if I'm not going to qualify it with some sort of evidence? Like I explained that, well, Tinkerbell had that wand thing, so, she could beat a lizard with that. You have to make some kind of argument. Just saying you believe, who cares? So you don't believe fuel is from fossils. You don't believe that the oil in the ground and the gases and the methane and all that stuff was created by this basic process of stuff decomposing and then being sealed off from the environment. That's just guesswork without any evidence. No, there's really a ton of evidence. That whole word fossil you were saying, well, they actually find fossils, with the decomposed matter, little ones inside of the oil even. There's little tiny fossils in there. But I helps to get prices high. So you have your own little conspiracy theory, huh? Is that it? They couldn't. You're saying they couldn't get a fair price for oil unless we scare people into thinking. And it's not even the greenhouse part that's the problem, right? I mean, that's not why oil prices go up. Oil prices go up is because we've actually used half the oil in the ground. We've released half of it. Half of the billions that took billions of years to stick in there. Well, hundreds of millions of years to stick in the ground. And we released it in less than, 200. Half of it. They even don't know where the water on Earth origins from. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they have lots of theories. I mean, it's really easy to create water. Hydrogen and oxygen and a match. You don't even need a match, right? You just need a meteor to hit, a little spark, and if there's any hydrogen and oxygen around, those two things are going to combine to make water. So not exactly a miraculous elemental chemical, compound. It's about as basic as you can get. All right, so the James idiot chimes in. It's actually more of an open question than people realize. It is possible that sedimentary rock is just generally good at capturing CO2 upwelling from the deep earth source. So he thinks there's a bunch of carbon dioxide deep inside the earth, even though it's a fairly tends to want to be a gas, especially when it's hot. And I guess he thinks it's really cold inside of the earth. Fuck, what a hopeless idiot. However, I think that if that was the case, we would see more fuels associated with igneous rocks. Yeah, right, rocks that are crystallized, I don't know what that, hard shit. So what an idiot. I mean, just a complete idiot. It's just useless idiot. I mean, rocks made in, 1,000-degree temperatures. Ugh. Alright. So, I mean, they're all stupid. I mean, it's just everybody in this board is stupid. Alright, so then this Lucas Sims. Human contribution to climate change is insignificant, though. Again, no evidence of that. And certainly no evidence that our contribution in terms of all the... I mean, I just can't imagine that you people can be this stupid to see all the crap that we throw into the atmosphere and not to think it has any impact. I mean, that's just so fucking... What are you smoking? How come 2,000 nuclear explosions have had no effect on our climate? What are you talking about, 2,000 nuclear explosions? What are you talking about? And how do you know there's no effect? If we've had 2,000, yeah, well, maybe they've had an effect. I don't even know, but what the fuck are you talking about? Most of the nuclear bomb tests have been underground, Einstein. Anyway, so then James has to climb on top of this guy's comment too for no good reason. CO2 is plant food. Of a sort. It literally makes the planet greener. Well, it's kind of like saying that water is human food. It's just a necessary part for metabolism. It really isn't food. But yes, CO2 for plants is food. That's my whole point. They take gaseous CO2 and convert it into a solid, retard. That's the whole point. All of human progress has occurred during warmer periods. So that's sort of a giveaway sentence, right? Why would he throw that in? All of human progress has occurred during warmer periods. Now, first, it's just silly, because the most progress humans made was in the last 150 years. And the whole point is that now it's much warmer than it was then, 100 years ago. So you can't even get that part right. Some theory of progress. They were actually very slow to progress if you really think about what progress is. I mean, recognizing that slavery is not a good idea. How long did it take them to do that? Oh yeah, 1,000 years? 2,000 years to figure that one out? 10,000 years to figure that out? Yeah, they obviously didn't think too fucking well, retard. But yeah, you probably think slavery is a good idea. Yeah, you're a good liberal. Climatologists have long ago figured out that humans love to wallow in the drama of impending global calamity. So he thinks it's all just for the drama. That there's no real possibility that humans can do anything to hurt anything. So it's like DDT. He probably thinks it was a perfectly fine. So what? It kills a few birds and frogs and fish. They're nothing like us. It's not like we evolved from fish. Yeah, no, it's not like we have anything in common. It's a complete con job that takes advantage of human psychology. Nobody wants to believe it. So you're again saying it's this con job based on what? Oh, that's right, it's based on pretty reasonable science. And yours is the stuff that doesn't make any sense. Your theory that the oil wasn't made by biological life and that that isn't the real process, and those were real carbon sinks, and that we have released that sunk carbon. That simple truth, your counter argument is crickets. There is exactly zero viable scientific evidence. So again, he says zero evidence. I mean, it's a silly thing to say. Argue specific things, but to say all the evidence is non-existent is just stupid. Gary criticizes others for living in a bubble of belief, yet he is doing the same thing when it comes to the atmospheric science. Well, in the first place, as I've pointed out, I have no real interest in becoming an atmospheric scientist, and you're the one who seems to be just talking out of his ass. No explanation of where you acquired any expertise on the subject. So when Gary wonders out loud as to why people are so stupid to fall for propaganda, I don't do any of that. He need not look any further than his own mind for a perfect example of this phenomenon. Well, again, my own mind, when I was a kid, could figure out that oil is black, and coal is black, and carbon is black, and yeah, that's probably what's happened. Is the carbon went down into the ground. Global warming is a farce. So again, from the perspective of a real scientist like myself. So he thinks he's the real scientist. Yet we have no evidence that he's done anything called real study or knows anything on the subject. Those that believe it live in the fog of delusion. Anyway, and they refuse to doubt. Gary is a perfect evidence of this with his wishy-washy response. There was nothing wishy-washy about the response. I pointed out how, well, what's your argument? I mean, we know from the fossil record what kind of organisms lived 200 million years ago, and they were dramatically different, and they were different because it was a warmer environment. And now it's colder. And why is it colder? It's because, all those animals and plants ended up storing a bunch of carbon, and we released it. Now what's wishy-washy about that, dumbass? Alright, so this is going on longer than I thought it would. Alright, so then the parabologic guy, makes this argument about the speed of sound. And it's just, again, another guy has to be so obnoxious about it. I mean, obnoxious in the sense that, I've made my argument, and why, and then I'm sort of expecting you to make some counter argument that has an example in it somewhere, but no example. Alright, anyway, it's not required that matter move faster than the speed of sound to generate sound. Well, I'm just saying, you won't find any example that I can't point out where the piece is moving faster than the speed of sound. The speed of, well, he says it in this thing, so I'll just read it and then I'll point out where he basically makes my point for me. Sound is generated anytime a medium is displaced by any amount of distance by an object moving within it. So he's saying this is creating sound. Now there's no evidence that this creates sound at all, that it has any vibration waves that this creates. There's really nothing. It creates it's not sound. It doesn't travel at the speed of sound. It's just waves, like waves in water. That's all this is. It's not sound. I mean, it's just a movement of it's an atmospheric disturbance, but it isn't sound because it's not being transmitted from molecule to molecule. The molecules are just moving around each other because they have time to do that because it's a slow movement. So here we go. Here's a good part. By an object moving within it, because an object must momentarily create a vacuum behind it as it moves in a direction. So that's exactly my point. The speed of sound is the speed at which the molecules can actually move. And so they can't fill the void that you create when you move a molecule too quickly. So that's exactly the point I'm making. So as you just stated, does this create a vacuum somewhere? Do you think there's a molecular vacuum being created by this? But I know if I move this, my hand, 800 miles an hour, you're going to hear it. Idiot. Alright, and in the medium, rushing to fill in the void, which causes a pressure wave to form. Well, again, this idea of a pressure wave, they're molecules, and what happens is the molecules move. They transmit the, like this battery, their distance from each other is dictated by the pressure of their electric or magnetic force, the electrons and the protons. And what's happening is when you move something fast, you violate that pressure. You create an instant pressure, and that pressure is just transferred right down the chain, and that's a sound. Sounds are different than pushing the battery. They're a violation of the electron and proton space. That's what the incursion is, and that's what makes every single battery move in the chain. That's why sound propagates so well, is because they don't get to go sideways and fill voids and re-equalize the pressure. There's no mechanism to equalize. Fucker. Anyway. There is no minimum speed of displacement that is required to create a moving wave of changing pressure in a medium. Well, I would argue there is. There isn't a rope, there isn't a violin string, there isn't anything under tension. It has a speed of transmission, it has a molecular tension, and you have to violate that tension. You have to disturb it, okay, faster than that transmission speed of the wave. That's why you have to move the rope fast to get the wave to move across the rope. Sound waves lose energy over distance according to the inverse square law. Well, that wasn't part of the subject, but yes, so what? The speed of, that just has to do with anything radiating. The inverse square law. Anything spherical radiation. The speed of sound is the speed at which sound waves travel in a given medium at a given temperature. Yes, that's right. It's one specific type of vibration, which again is the molecules actually jumping. Not just moving, but jumping. Let's see. Not the speed of the particles of the medium themselves. Well, it is the speed of the atoms, and the fact is that's to move an atom requires a certain minimum amount of energy, as I've sort of tried to explain. Atoms are made out of something that has to absorb the actual velocity before it can have the velocity. It can't just move, and it has to absorb a force. So you have to provide sufficient force to move the atom fast enough, and that's why you have to have more force go in than the transmission speed. All right, temperature. Okay, the speed of the particles is not what is measured as temperature. Well, again, temperature just has to do with how much agitation there is in a system, but again, that just changes the distance between the objects. So it will just, increase the speed of sound. Decrease the speed of sound. When an object breaks the sound barrier, the time it takes for the sound waves to reach you doesn't change as a function of the object's changing distance from you, and this causes the waves to overlap with each other, resulting in a sonic boom. Says you. I'm just saying the idea of overlap is silly. Let's say I'm creating waves because I'm going a certain speed. So there's waves coming off me slower, and I go faster than those waves. The waves won't pile up. I'll just go right past them. The old waves, I'll go into the future, okay, and the old wave will be behind me. And I'll create new waves ahead of me. And I'll go faster than those waves, and those waves will end up being behind me. But there's no bunching up. There's no waves anyway. There's vibrations moving through the molecular tension. But but that's it. There's no real wave, and there's no way to pile up waves. That's just nonsense. You can't make a tsunami wave. Okay. So I said, it's not required that matter move faster than the speed of sound to generate sound. And then so I said, for example. And I don't get any examples from any of these assholes. So that's kind of the giveaway. An object much, this is what I said, this is my quote of him. An object must momentarily create a vacuum behind it as it moves in a direction. And so then I said, to create a vacuum, don't you need to move faster than the medium can fill the space? Okay. In other words, the transmission speed of the medium. So obviously a vacuum would indicate you've just moved so fast that nothing could fill the space. Alright, so James says, no, the air molecules are already moving the speed of sound. So that doesn't even make any sense. They're vibrating at all kinds of rates. Everything vibrates at all kinds of rates. Okay, it has many frequencies of vibration built into its blobby form. All kinds of shutters. The reason the speed of sound is 700 miles per hour is because that is how fast the molecule in still air are moving already. No, it has to do with how far apart they are, how much pressure is between them. Put them under more pressure and the speed of sound will be faster. Put them under less pressure and the speed of sound will be slower. Alright, already, let's see, they're about how fast the molecules are moving already. People tend to assume that air molecules are still air are motionless. Well, I don't know what people you're talking about. I don't. So go ahead, show me the people who've assumed that, who think the air molecules are all staying exactly where they are. Go ahead, show me somebody who thinks that. That is not the case. They are highly energized. Well, says you. I would argue that they're in a field of infrared radiation. They themselves aren't energized. The molecules are in a field of radiation. And it's that radiation that keeps pushing them in all kinds of directions. The infrared light you don't believe exists, apparently. Anyway, people tend to, let's see, it's not the case. They are highly energized. So again, they're not energized. The atmosphere they're in is made energetic because there's forces in it. There's radiation in it, electromagnetic radiation. Air molecules are moving very fast already. So again, they're not moving, they're vibrating. So there is no need to move faster than the speed of sound. Well, again, you haven't dealt with the point at all, but whatever. Your evidence doesn't exist. Fuck you. Alright, so I repeated myself just because I got no example. So I said, for example. Um, and so Jim said to that, do you dispute that air molecules are already moving 700 miles per hour? I dispute that they're moving, yes, 700 miles per hour in any one direction or anything like that. They're vibrating at all kinds of speeds, depending on any one moment what they're being hit by. So it's a range of frequencies they vibrate at. Dumbass. Alright. So parabologic he's quoting now. It's not required that matter move faster than the speed of sound to generate sound. And Jim says, yes, you are correct. Gary maintains many of the popular delusions about the atmosphere. Frankly, the theory that all sound requires something to move faster than the speed of sound isn't a popular delusion, actually. I haven't even heard anybody ever suggest it, retard. So, okay. So let's see, Purple says, when an object moves within a medium, it will create a disturbance in the pressure of the medium. So again, that's the whole point. Yes, exactly. And it depends on the speed of that disturbance whether it will propagate through the medium. If it doesn't move fast enough, it won't propagate, regardless of how fast the object is moving. Well, no, it's much regardless. This will not make a sound that will be transmitted. It will not transmit. If I move faster, and a little faster, and a little faster, all of a sudden, that sound will travel perhaps a mile. Because it's now fast enough to force the molecules just to pass it on, to pass the buck, to pass the movement buck. The medium will still have to shift around and fill the displaced volume. Well, again, that's the whole point is molecules moving around each other, like bouncing, is okay. When they compress and create pressure, that's when it's a different game. So bouncing off of each other is one thing. Compressing creates the propagation of sound. Alright, fill the displaced volume, generating mechanical waves in the process. Yes, and again, saying mechanical waves doesn't say anything because there's a distinction between things that are transmitted based on the pressure of the electron and the proton and things. It's like the difference between the strong force and the weak force. They're not the same thing. The speed of sound is around 4 times faster than water and air. Yes, density matters. But do things have to move 4 times faster to generate sound in water? No, they don't. Well, you say they don't. How do you know they don't? Where's any evidence that they don't? That a whale doesn't have to vibrate water molecules faster, or that little snappy, there's a little shrimp that has a claw, it snaps really fast. Where's your evidence? Oh, that's right, you don't have any. So then he says at Jim, the speed of sound is not determined by the speed of the molecules alone, but is a function of the relationship between the speed of the molecules and the density of the medium. That's why sound travels faster in water. And again, it travels much differently. Frequencies are different that travel through water. Obviously, for that reason, you can't use a lot of communication devices in water. The more densely packed molecules take less time to collide with neighboring molecules than in air, and that contributes to the speed of the waves. The fact that they're dense is true, and the fact that they have to move less distance is also true. But the fact that you need more energy to move them is also true, because their average weight of the molecules is much heavier. I recommend watching the video titled The Sound Waves and Their Sources, 2nd edition, 1950, Encyclopedia Britannica Films. So, yeah, great. Yeah. You can't do better than 1950s science. But again, it's not going to get to the fundamental molecular function. So, you know, looking at waves in mediums isn't going to demonstrate anything about what's happening molecularly. And again, if you can show me something in that video where something doesn't move faster than the speed of sound to create a sound, well, then you have an argument. So why don't you just answer my question and show me one single thing that makes sound that's moving this fast, slow like this. Show me something moving this slow that creates sound. Show me something. Anything. Fuckhead. Alright, that's probably enough. Now we'll just delete a little bit of this rubbish from the McVin guy. He's done here. Alright. Oh yeah, and then the other guy I had to go to was the guy I had to spell his name backwards. Agnew, something Agnew. Yeah, he had to go. So anyway, no, sorry, not really on the subject. This I'll title the video that because these you know, sound is an interesting subject. So it's sort of like physics, but it's really not critical to this whole physics thing I'm doing. So I don't want to waste time arguing about it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it has. I mean, it might be one of those things where, you know, yes, if I can prove it, then all of a sudden I would gain some credibility. But it's just not a subject I want to get into that kind of depth. So you can believe what you wish. I'm just saying until somebody shows me a sound created by something not moving faster than the speed of sound, I'm unconvinced. Then I'm wrong. Yeah. Assholes.